From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. Representatives of the so-called Lima Group met on Monday in Santiago, Chile. They reportedly followed up on the topics discussed in their last meeting held in Bogotá, with particular emphasis on the situation in Venezuela, as the prospect of U.S. military intervention in the region continues to weigh heavily on the bloc. And before this meeting, the government of Canada announced new economic sanctions against the Venezuelan government. According to a statement by the Canadian Foreign Minister, 43 people they consider to be close to President Nicolás Maduro have been sanctioned. The statement did not provide the names of those sanctioned, but mentioned they were high-ranking officials and regional governors. Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland took part in the Lima Group's meeting in Chile. Our correspondent in Santiago, Tiare Valenzuela, has more on the meeting.
The latest meeting of the Lima Group took place in this hotel in Santiago. 13 representatives plus an envoy sent by the self-proclaimed interim president of Venezuela, Juan Guaidó, took part in the meeting. Early in the morning, they arrived to the presidential palace to meet the Chilean president, Sebastián Piñera. This latest meeting was called for with more urgency than before, since in previous meetings the group has been unable to reach any agreement about the situation in Venezuela. This meeting also takes place soon after the U.S. Secretary Mike Pompeo toured a number of Latin American countries, including Chile. During his visit, Pompeo met with the President Piñera, the foreign minister, and a group of Chilean business people. Social movements have strongly rejected Pompeo's visit, saying that the U.S. may be the one who called for this Lima Group meeting.
We thank the editor for that report. Venezuelan citizens gathered at the Simón Bolívar Bridge on Sunday to protest against the U.S. Secretary of State's visit to the Colombian border. Pompeo visited the border city of Cúcuta, where he met with Colombian President Iván Duque and once again took aim at the Venezuelan government. Citizens say Pompeo's presence is part of U.S. interventionism in Venezuela. Among those gathered at the bridge was Freddy Bernal, the commander of the Bolivarian militias in the state of Táchira. He called on citizens to continue defending their country's independence and sovereignty.
Regardless of anything else, Colombia is a U.S. colony, and as such, the U.S. can do whatever they want there. But here, once you cross the border, it's a different story. This is the land of Simón Bolívar, of Zamora, Chavez, and Nicolas. This is the land of people who demand respect. Therefore, in this land, the US does not rule. In this land, we are sovereign and independent.
China has responded to remarks made by Pompeo during his visit to Latin America, calling them blatant lies. The spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry, Lu Kang, said his government objects to the U.S. constantly slandering China-Latin America relations.
We have noticed some false accusations made by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo against China on the Venezuelan issue. I would like to say that China's position on Venezuela is clear, as well as consistent. We are safeguarding the purpose and principles of the United Nations Charter, as well as regional peace and stability. It should be pointed out that for some time, some US politicians have been carrying the same script of slandering China all over the world, fanning the flames and sowing discord everywhere. Their words and deeds are despicable, but lies are lies. Even if you say it 1,000 times, they are still lies. Mr. Pompeo, you can stop.
Uruguay will assist in taking just under 100 Venezuelans home as part of the Return to the Homeland plan. The group was to be flown from Argentina. However, the government denied entry to the humanitarian flight. The Venezuelans left to Uruguay by boat earlier on Monday. From there, they will be flown back home, although their flight has reportedly been delayed.
I am very grateful to God and to the Venezuelan government for giving us the opportunity to return home, especially people like me, who could not afford to return by our own means due to economical difficulties. The government has given us a chance to return to our country.
I am 64. I have been in Argentina for 1 year and 4 months, but after that, I realized that there is nothing like Venezuela, nothing like my country.
A judge in Argentina has reportedly ordered the seizure of the historical archive of the grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo. Dozens of supporters gathered at the organization's main office in Buenos Aires to protest against the order to make an inventory of the group's financial assets. Protesters claim police are there to seize the human rights organization's historical archives. This organization seeks to locate the missing children of mothers detained during the country's military dictatorship. A 7-month-old baby was killed in the department of La Guajira after an attack against his father, a former FARC member. Our correspondent Jose Manuel Jimenez has more.
A 7-month-old baby died on his way to the hospital following an attack near the Simón Trinidad Vereda Tierra Grata territory. This is an area where former FARC members live and are prepared to be reintegrated back into society. The toddler was the son of former FARC combatant Carlos Enrique González, who was also seriously injured and remains hospitalized. His wife was also hurt in the attack. The head of the National Agency of Reincorporation denounced the ambush, which led to the child's death. He said the events are being investigated by the prosecutor's office, adding that there needs to be patience and steps to implement peace are carried out. The FARC group has also rejected the assault. In recent times, roughly 100 former FARC members and their families have been killed, and the government has failed to guarantee their protection. At least 50 social movement leaders have also been killed across the country for the year to date. Human rights organizations have said that in spite of the peace agreement, which was signed in 2016, at least 500 indigenous leaders have been murdered. In light of this, 3,000 social leaders from around Colombia will gather in Bogotá from April 18th to May 3rd to call on the government to guarantee their safety and implement peace treaties.
We thank Jose Manuel Jimenez for that report. The death toll in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil has risen to 10 after 2 buildings collapsed on Friday. Rescue workers are continuing the search for survivors. However, it's been difficult as flash floods and heavy rains hit the area. Rescue workers hope they may still find survivors due to the air pockets that might have formed under the rubble. The 2 collapsed buildings were constructed illegally, and it is unclear how many people lived in them. There has been an increase in the number of people denied visas by the U.S. consulate in Mexico. Lawyers representing some migrants said consular officers are denying visas even though applicants fulfill all financial and legal requirements. This is an amendment to the U.S. State Department's Foreign Affairs manual broadens the grounds for applicants to be considered public charges.
At times I want to think that everything will be okay and I'll be able to be with my family again, because it's very difficult to think that I won't be able to return to watch my children grow up, where their life is, where they have their friends. They don't know anything here.
Roughly 2,000 Central American migrants began making their way towards the U.S. border from southern Mexico on Monday. The caravan, which mainly includes women and children, left the state of Chiapas, walking next to the Tapachula-Huehuetan highway. Several migrants' caravans have tried to reach the U.S. since October 2018, despite threats by U.S. President Donald Trump.
We don't have another option but to migrate. We don't have another option. And if Trump is not happy, well then, but we don't have another option but to do that, because in our countries we don't have any support. We see that on this side. It's better so everyone heads this way. We think that Trump's heart will have to soften, because we have needs in our countries. For our families. We don't come here because we felt like it one day. We come because we have needs. We left family.
Haiti is experiencing blackouts and fuel shortages following a dispute between the government and U.S. energy trading company Novum. Novum says the government owes $40 million in overdue payments for fuel. Haiti had relied on fuel from Venezuela, which offered cheaper gasoline to several Caribbean countries through Petrocaribe. However, this fell apart in 2018 due to the economic situation in Venezuela caused by U.S. sanctions. The price of public service bus fares has gone up in Barbados. The International Monetary Fund suggested a hike of $5 Barbados dollars, up from $2. However, the government has increased it to $3.50. There's widespread concern that the increase would add to the labor pains currently being experienced by retrenched workers. Illegal taxis have also begun offering commuters a lower fare. The family of Cuban doctors Acel Herrera Correa and Landy Rodriguez, who were kidnapped on Friday in Kenya, have spoken about the support given to them.
We like to thank everyone because we have received a lot of support from our neighbors, doctors, authorities, everyone who has visited us to offer us their support and tell us not to lose hope, that we need to stay strong and positive because they are going to come home safely.
April 15th marks the 58th anniversary of the U.S. invasion of Cuba through the Bay of Pigs, also known as Giron Beach. Exiled Cubans supported by the U.S. invaded Cuba in April 1961, attempting to take control of Cuban territory. The invaders hoped to create a provisional government with support from the OAS. However, the revolutionary forces of Fidel Castro won after 65 hours of fighting. Communities in the province of Matanzas have organized activities to commemorate the victory over the imperialist aspirations of the U.S. And President Miguel Díaz-Canel praised the courage of the Cuban people. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Earth. Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. More than 800 people have died due to the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as the World Health Organization decided not to declare it a global health emergency. The WHO said the Ebola outbreak, which has been ongoing since August, has not spread beyond the DRC, and therefore there is no benefit to declaring it an emergency. The statement made on Friday marks the second time the WHO has decided against declaring Ebola in the DRC an emergency. Our correspondent Oscar Ipildi brings us the latest details about the outbreak.
Sadly, the Ebola epidemic has worsened over the last few days. Health officials in the DRC confirmed 40 new cases recently. Today's report is not available yet, but it is evident that the epidemic is spreading faster. There is a growing amount of so-called community deaths, where people with Ebola avoid going to health centers to get treated because they are afraid they will be quarantined. By doing this, they remain in their communities, spreading the disease, and finally dying there. And distrust in the Ebola treatment centers. Last Friday, the Emergency Committee of the World Health Organization held a meeting with the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo about the situation. However, they decided not to designate this outbreak as an emergency of international importance, and therefore, the borders of the DRC will not be closed. However, the committee did urge neighboring countries to increase their readiness to face the outbreak. Until now, no cases have spread outside of the territories of Beni and Butembo, inside the DRC. Therefore, health authorities hope they will be able to contain the epidemic soon. But some factors reportedly hinder their efforts, such as armed groups working in the region and a lack of communication between communities. One of the main fears is that the virus will spread to the city of Goma or neighboring countries like Rwanda. This would mean the epidemic would become an international emergency and it would be much harder to control.
We thank Oscar for that report. The Military Council in Sudan has met with political parties and announced that the former ruling party will not be participating in the new interim government. The former President Omar al-Bashir's National Congress Party has been sidelined. The Military Council urged political groups to agree on an independent figure to be the next prime minister. The council also announced a new intelligence service chief. Reforms of the intelligence service were a key demand of protesters who continue to call for a civilian transitional government.
We want from you, and we wish that everybody reaches an agreement in a short period of time to find and agree on an independent and nationalist figure to become a prime minister. We hope that everybody agrees on the formation of a civil government that paves the way and prepares the environment for a social and political reconciliation, and that it can reach peace.
Meanwhile, the country's largest opposition group, the Sudanese Professionals Association, has called for the formation of what they call a civil council. According to them, a civil council would assure the public that the revolution will not be hijacked by the military and members of the former regime. They added that while the military should be allowed to have representation on the council, it must be led by a civilian.
There is this one demand, which is one of the main demands of the protest movement, which is the formation of a sovereign civilian council with military representations to protect the revolution and to guarantee the demands are met. Our second demand is the creation of a civilian government made up of cadres and is tasked to be agreed upon with full executive powers.
Algerian police have detained dozens of protesters who have vowed to continue rallying against the interim government. Revolutionary demonstrators want a full transition from the government of Abdelaziz Bouteflika. Protesters say that the leaders of the interim government can't guarantee that the July 4th elections will be free and fair. Police used tear gas and water cannons to repress the citizens in the streets, who responded by throwing stones.
We are only calling for our rights. We have not harmed anyone. We were standing peacefully, but the police interfered to disperse us. Every time the same thing happens. Police intervene against us. Yesterday, police arrested our colleagues, including women.
Meanwhile, journalists in Algeria staged a protest against media censorship. State-owned EPTV journalists have called on the government to allow them to be objective and provide complete information.
It's the right of the people to make their voices heard through television. This TV company is the only one that belongs to the people. Why? Because 1% of the gas bill the citizen pays goes to the TV company, so citizens have a say.
The figurehead of 5 channels is the news. Today, news does not translate the popular demands of Algerians, which are no longer only expressed every Friday, they are expressed throughout the week.
A missile strike in Libya's capital Tripoli has damaged residential buildings as fighting continues between the Eastern forces and the internationally recognized government. No casualties have been reported, but residents suffered minor injuries. It is not yet clear who is behind the attack. According to the latest UN tallies, more than 13,000 people have been forced to evacuate their homes in the past week. With less than a month before South Africans go to the polls, the country has continued to experience violent protests by angry citizens demanding improved access to services. The protesters are accusing elected officials from both the ruling and opposition parties of turning a deaf ear to their complaints. Despite the progress that has been made in the last 2 decades, millions of South Africans still live in informal settlements that lack basic services such as water and electricity. A task force formed by the Kenyan government has recommended the recognition of intersex people as third sex. The task force suggested the introduction of an intersex marker on official documentation. It also said they should be counted as a separate gender identity in the census. Campaigners have long complained about discrimination and the need for medical care for intersex people. If passed into law, Kenya would be the first African country to legally recognize intersex people. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Enjoy the best content in spaces where you will discover new perspectives, innovation, well-being, conservation, equity, traditions. A wide variety of contents that you will find on Telesur, the news source of Latin America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. A huge fire has broken out at the historic Notre Dame Cathedral in central Paris. According to officials, the fire started a few minutes after 6 p.m. local time inside the cathedral, which the blaze. Although some reports say they are unsure whether they will be able to put out the flames. The cause of the fire has not yet been revealed, and police said they are treating this as an accident. Demonstrators in London held a rally on Sunday to support WikiLeaks co-founder Julian Assange outside Belmarsh prison. They gathered to demand the release of Assange and called for the defense of free speech. Assange is currently imprisoned after being seized by UK police from inside the Ecuadorian embassy last Thursday. This happened after the Ecuadorian government removed the political asylum he was granted back in 2012.
I think this is a great injustice because he's not a criminal but a journalist, a very good journalist. And what the Ecuadorian president Lenín Moreno has done is very unfair. Moreno is sending him to his death.
We, a group of activists and social movements, are here to protest against the imprisonment of Julian Assange and the withdrawal of his political asylum. We think that it is a crime against humanity, a crime against his rights and against the freedom of the press.
And members of the European and German parliament joined demonstrators on Monday to show their support for Assange. Spanish and German lawmakers gathered outside Belmarsh prison to demand that UK and the European Union prevent his extradition to the US. The lawmakers said they were meant to meet Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy, but instead had to rally outside the prison where he is being held. Syrian Kurds have repatriated 25 women and children that were freed from the Islamic State group. The Yazidis were rescued in the final push against the jihadist group. Syrian fighters say they rescued some 300 Yazidi women and children during the fight to reclaim the last scrap of territory in eastern Syria.
We know for sure that Yazidi women have arrived in Turkey, in the Gulf countries and in other Syrian provinces. We can say that about 3,000 people are still missing. Their fate is unknown, between those who have been sold in Syria and those who were killed in the fighting.
Several people have been killed with others wounded after rockets hit the northern city of Aleppo in Syria. The death toll in the government-held Adila neighborhood has risen to at least 11, while the same amount of civilians have been wounded. According to police report, nearby rebel fighters from the Idlib province launched the attack on Sunday. The day before, similar attacks occurred in another Aleppo district, claiming the lives of 2 children and injuring 5 more. People in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea celebrated the anniversary of the birth of the country's founder, Kim Il-sung. Citizens are paying tribute to their leaders on what is the most important day in the North Korean calendar. Kim Il-sung led the country from its establishment in 1948 and claimed a victory in the Korean War over the US-backed South. The Kim family are revered in North Korea, and bronze statues of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il look over the capital. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. As always, these and other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Get your body. Tuesdays, only on Telesur. Follow the most important global events through a comprehensive perspective. With a team of journalists in 25 locations around the world to convey our people's reality. From the South. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
We are present at every